And we're live. It's good evening, everybody. Live and uncut once again this Friday. I'll tell you, I'm totally stoked with the guest I've got today. But just before I do that, this show is dedicated to my mother, who sadly died last Sunday. She loved my photography. She thought I was absolutely the best photographer in the whole wide world. Bless her. And she would have hated if I'd cancelled this show. So, Mum, this is for you. And I couldn't wish for a better guest on such a day. A man who's just retired, Ted Forbes. Welcome, Ted, to my show.
Now the pressure's on. That was a really nice dedication, Paul.
Thank you very much. Short and sweet. Short and
now
sweet.
The pressure's on. I've got to live up to it now.
You have indeed. You have indeed. Mind you, I've just been an avid fan of your show. You were the first show that I found on iTunes, and I just love the way you've presented the show. You've opened up my eyes to photographers that I was aware of but didn't know the detail of, and that's what I think that is what's the class of your show, to be quite honest with you, and I mean that most sincerely.
Well, thank you.
But let's start right from the beginning, as I like to, Ted, with my guest. Photography.
Okay.
How did it all start for you?
How did it all start for me? It's funny. People ask me this question. I always have to think about it. It all started for me. I think, I started when I was pretty young, and I think there's kind of two paths that came to cross that made it work for me eventually. I think the first was, I was raised in a very artistic family. My father's an illustrator, still is to this day. So when I was a kid, he was doing commercial illustration. He was doing mostly magazine covers back when people used illustration. A lot of Sports Illustrated, they did covers of people where, they'd have a boxing match of two boxers that had never played together or boxed together, so they would have to get an illustrator to interpret and things like that. So anyway, very artistic family. My mother's an interior designer. My sister's a graphic designer. And a lot of their friends were very artistic in nature, too. And there was one person in particular who was a very good friend of my dad's who was a photographer. And I knew he was a photographer, and I kind of knew what that meant. And I remember we used to go over to their house. Well, I didn't know this when I was 10 years old, but they had the famous portrait of Stravinsky that Arnold Newman had taken. And I didn't know that Greg had actually worked for Arnold Newman back in the day. And none of that made sense to me at the time. It was just this beautiful black and white portrait of Igor Stravinsky sitting at a piano. And it was this beautiful print of it. And I always loved that print. And I told Ibari next when I was on his show this story as well.
That's right.
That was the print that, for whatever reason, started speaking to me as a photographer. I didn't know it at the time. I think, like a lot of other people, and this will date me and start showing my age here, but, when I was probably, I don't know, 5th grade or something like that, 6th grade, so I was probably between 10 and 12. I really wanted a camera. I wanted to be able to shoot pictures, and I didn't know why, and I just thought it would be kind of fun. And so my parents, one year for my birthday, bought me, I don't remember the model name, but it's one of those little skinny Kodak cameras that took the 110 film. And which, it's funny, in the United States at least, if you go to the drugstore, you can still find 110. It's always like on the bottom shelf, and there's like a little layer of dust over the top you have to get off. But I had that, and I remember going over, I still have the first roll of film that I ever shot somewhere around here. And the pictures are awful. I remember a very good friend of mine and they had a swimming pool that there were those people who would let it go in the winter, and it would, things living in it, and we were fishing out of his swimming pool of all things. Anyway, this warped childhood of mine. Anyway, those two things I think later on crossed paths for me. When I went into high school, I wanted to pursue a career in music, and I was really serious about that. I played jazz guitar, I played in rock bands, I played in country bands, and I used the money I made on that to pay my way through music school at the university level. And the whole time I really wanted to do film composition. I finished up in orchestral composition, and I realized that I'd need to move to Los Angeles and star for another 10 years to maybe have a shot at that. And around that time, I've always been taking pictures through this whole time, and I've always been very serious about it. And around that time, I made some career choices to try to move outside of that, and I got into software development and new media, and of course then you get into the late 90s when you have the tech boom, and so a lot of things happened for me at that time. And I remember the first time digital cameras became affordable, and specifically it was the Canon Digital Rebel that was like one of the first that you could get. I think it was the KISS 6000 or so, I don't remember, maybe in the UK. UK or Japan. And so I bought one of those because I was really interested in digital photography and hated it when I bought the camera. It was just a strange experience for me. I enjoyed it, and I love the fact, particularly with God, and that camera wasn't even that good in low light, but the things you could go do at night, and the way you could just see and get immediate feedback, like even faster than you could with a Polaroid, and it's the final quality, and it was enough megapixels to shoot with, and it was really interesting, but for some reason it wasn't quite there for me. And Flickr had come out, and I was one of the early Flickr users. We were talking about Kevin Meredith a little while ago, and he was one of the people I met on there early on that I just loved, and of course he's big with the Lomo stuff. And I really wanted to start doing alternative process and go back to this highly tactile thing, because when you're doing music production or whether you're coding or anything like that, I'm on a computer all day. And because photography, especially at that point in my life, it definitely turned this corner to where it was a really serious hobby that I just couldn't get enough of. I was, every time I go to the used bookstore, I'd get books, and I think that's where my love of photo history started coming from. And I wanted to know who everybody was, and it was just all making sense. Just prior to that turnaround we had with digital technology, and I think I spent $1,500 on that camera or something, which is way overpriced for what it is today because it's got nothing on it. But anyway, it was around that time where I was like, you know what, this is the way everything's going, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to go in that direction. I want to go backwards. And there's some really wonderful photographers, particularly at that time in the late 90s, that I was very inspired by. And I think, you have people like Tom Burrell, who was real hot at that point in the fine art world, doing these things with flowers with this ode to Mapplethorpe, and, even some earlier stuff. And then you had, I guess Hiroshi Sugimoto I'd heard about around that time as well. But Abelardo Morel was another big one who was starting to have a lot of success. And these guys were shooting 4x5, particularly Burrell. He's shooting pinholes. He was doing a lot of collodion work, which was just fascinating to me. It's something that, it's the weird, and I know I'm rambling, but it's this weird paradigm shift of the internet where you have essentially this blast of technology, but with that, the technology is attractive, but what was really attractive is this blast of information. Because when I was growing up, I'd take my little 110 film, and my mom would take me, and we'd drive over, and we used to have this thing in the United States called Fox Photo, which was later bought out by Wolf Camera. I guess they had to keep the animal thing going, but Fox Photo was the photo hut. Like if you've ever seen that '70s show, and the stoner from Cheech and Chong works in the photo hut. It was a photo hut, and it had a drive-through, and you'd drop off your film, you'd pay for it, give them your name and address and all that, and a week later they'd call you and you come pick it up. It wasn't even a 1 hour process. And it was amazing. But at that point in my life, I couldn't. I didn't know about collodion. I didn't know about alternative process. You could go find out about those things certainly, but just as a kid. But later on, the internet is what brings all that around. And then all of a sudden, it was this world of photography that is just presented before you. Anyway, long story short, I think those are the things that kind of came around to it. And then I started the show actually years later. Probably around 2008, I believe, was my first episode on that.
Was the show basically an excuse to get yourself back into what I would term as old, with respect, great respect to the old time photographers? Was the show the intention to bring that to the fore to everyone, to say, hey guys, look, this is what was being produced in the 20s and 30s and 40s?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it was unintentionally. The real reason I started the show is that's probably about a year after I'd started working at the art museum, that later became what I just left as of 2 days ago. But after 7 years there, so I guess the show's almost 6 years old then. But what it was I was producing video with artists, and I hadn't had a lot of experience in producing video-based works, and so I wanted a little project where I could mess up on and make all my mistakes. So I thought, I'm going to do a photography show, and I thought I'll do 10 episodes and that'll be that. And lo and behold, people are actually watching it and enjoying it and sending email, and there's this conversation going on. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And so here we are, 250 videos. I think it's 194 this week, proper episodes later. But the original intention in doing the show, though, I mean, I did have... Yeah, somebody's backing up now. Sorry, we're going to have construction noises, so I warned you earlier. But anyway, the original intention of the show, when I started it, was that I was consuming as much as I could online as well, and there were a couple photography-oriented I guess podcasts or online videos at the time, and I really did not like the way they were being done. They were mostly done by people who had backgrounds in computer programming, and they were photo enthusiasts, and that's a big difference. And you know, I think just like talking about camera reviews and gear all the time, I mean, there's just a depth that's not even being addressed. There's nothing wrong with people who do camera reviews. That's cool, but I don't always. I mean, you know, if you go to the magazine rack, do you want to just read, you know, popular photography or read about consumer reviews, or do you want to like pick up Black and White or one of those and read about what people are doing? And so there was a void there, and so I was certainly trying to fill that. And I think for me, I don't think I necessarily pegged it down to an era. I think the example you mentioned was the 20s or the 30s. It would include that. It would include, you know, Edward S. Curtis. It would include, you know, Fox Talbot and Louis Daguerre, and I mean, it would just be consuming of everything, because it's all. I mean, and if you watch my show, you understand that you know, a lot of my attitude is that, you know, there's things I don't like, but I respect everything, because there is this whole history and fabric that is the oeuvre of photography as we know it, and we are a part of that. We are an extension of that. Everybody has been an extension of what came before them, and I think that's where success comes artistically, is understanding where you are culturally in a point in time, and also at the same time being able to realize where you come from in that lineage. So it's kind of this crossroads of those two things that come together. When they come together correctly, that's when you have people that really do wonderful things. I have never been one of those people who shot really wonderful things, but you know what I'm talking about, our heroes that we look up to, the Bressons, or you know, even more contemporary Martin Parr, or you have you know, whoever that is. It was Ansel Adams at his time. Does that make sense?
I think yeah, no, it does, because I think that basically you can, as you know, you can get on the internet now and you can click on Google Plus and Flickr, and you can see some fantastic photographs. But
no question,
it comes basically from what's the word I'm looking at? It comes from history. The guys that are producing the work now, they're obviously fantastic, and they know how to develop things and post-process with the use of the computer. But they wouldn't have been able to do what they're creating now if we didn't know and appreciate what the old timers were doing all those years ago. And it goes right the way back, you know. And each stage, as you've described in your show, there's been a definitive individual that has changed the face of photography. Henri Cartier-Bresson, for one, and Brassai is another one for me, and then of course you got the likes of David Bailey, and now he brings it up into the present day. I think in actual fact, really, if you're going to talk about individuals that have changed, I'd really put Trey Ratcliffe up there as well, because of his style of photography. It is a lot of post-processing done on his work, and he doesn't apologize for it. Unapologetically post-processes his work, but he's changed the style of way a lot of people look at it.
Absolutely.
Teaching is obviously a very important part of your life, Ted. Obviously, when it started off, you enjoyed teaching. You went through that period, and I mean, you got really sort of with it, you know, and sort of decided to. But this show, to me, is the teacher coming out of you, and you use that as your pure enjoyment. Did you teach photography at the college or the university you were at?
I taught several things. The main thing I did, I wanted to teach more photography, but having a background in multimedia, I also taught. I mean, the track is very different. I did not teach darkroom photography in a traditional sense. That would have been great. No. I taught at a community college level, so they're one of the institutions that's kind of moving away from that, and they're focusing on what they say are teaching careers or preparing people for a career. And I've got news for you: preparing people there. I mean, they make that sound like it's like welding or something, where you're going to just, you know, have some kind of certification that an employer is looking for, and the arts have never been like that, even commercially. And I think a lot of stuff is going away. So the two things I taught was more of like from a commercial standpoint, but also with this charge of digital and multimedia. And then I also taught web design and coding as well. So those were the things I caught. And the reason I mean, there were several reasons why I ultimately left. And I'll try and boil these down. I'll start talking and not stop sometimes. But you know, for me, the big kicker was I'm a big people person. I do really well interacting with a group of people, and I love teaching in that regard, because when you have a classroom full of students that you're going to work with for 16 or 20 weeks or whatever, you're going to develop relationships and bonds, and there's a magic that happens when you are showing students something, and they, at first they don't understand it, and then all of a sudden they start to understand it, and they start to pick it up, and then they start to do their own thing with it. Ultimately, is what you want, and when that happens, it's very magical, and these are just cheesy words to describe this, but it is important, and that's what makes it. Just this cool experience for me. And unfortunately, one of the things the community colleges are doing here is they're putting all their courses online. I obviously do a lot of teaching now with my photography podcast and my YouTube channel online, and so I'm already doing that. And the way they're doing it is just antiquated, stupid, embarrassing. I've heard it's gotten better since I got out of it 2 years ago, but in the U.S. they all use this online software called Blackboard, which was just it's so dated because you have the average person now who grows up, particularly people who are younger, who are millennials, they're used to, in terms of like user interface or UI, their point of reference is like Facebook, or it's like Twitter, or it's even YouTube or Flickr, which are pretty good, easy to use user interfaces. I mean, my mom can post on Facebook. I didn't have to train her very much on that or at all. People can do that, and you have Blackboard, which is hard to navigate, it's difficult, it's confusing, and so that created this huge wall between the teacher and the student as a relationship. It's harder for students to learn that way. I think it's really difficult and challenging to teach that way, and I had it, I'm not going to teach online like that, and it was a really tough decision to make. I think like anything in life, and I'm really good at like choosing the more difficult financial answer to each one of these, which is maybe insane, but I was making a little bit of money part-time teaching this, and it wasn't a lot, but it was a significant amount. I mean, it was definitely all my bills and cutting into my rent a little bit every month. It allowed me to save money, and it was really hard to let go of that, but ultimately I had to be honest with myself, and it's something I didn't believe in. Making money when you're not happy is not a good combination ever, and it doesn't solve any problems. No. So I finally just decided, here's a leap of faith. I had a full-time day job, so it wasn't like I was going completely out like I did Wednesday, but but I left it, and it worked out. And for me, it's like, I teach online now, and so it's not yet a classroom situation, or it's not yet a thing where you develop those relationships with students. And I'm going to flip this back on you, and you probably didn't expect this, but I think what's interesting is, and I don't know much about it because I haven't had time to investigate, but what Trey Radcliffe is doing with Arcanum, and I really appreciate the fact that he is, I know you've participated with this, the fact that he is trying to do something new. I think we've been on this university system in formal education. I have nothing against formal education, and if you're in high school and you're saying, should I go to college or go to the university, yes, you should, because when you get a degree it says you can complete something, and for most of the world that is still very important. But I'm just saying we don't have to teach the same way anymore, and anyway, that's my soapbox on that. But anyway, but yes, that's why I ended up leaving that, and I left it, but in a sense I didn't, because I'm able to form relationships with people who are fans of the show, who enjoy watching it, and it's great. So that's kind of where I sit on that. So.
You mentioned about the Arcanum, because I do partake in the Arcanum. When it was advertised, I immediately put my name down on the list. And I said this openly to the cohort, which I'm a member of, Valerie Jardin's cohort on street photography. Mm-hmm. I wanted to learn about street photography, and I wanted to hear what people had to say about my work.
Sure.
And I obviously wanted to learn from an experienced workshop host as well, which Valerie is. But the thing which I've found most intriguing, and I've said this openly on my blog and actually in the cohort itself, I learned more about street photography in 5 days of being part of the Arcanum, not from what Valerie was telling me, but from my fellow apprentices making comment about my work, than I did in 5 years of being a member of my photographic club. And that's what I was missing. My photographic club, every third week or so, we'd have a judge in and you'd talk about it. And you knew exactly as soon as that judge turned up what type of event it was going to be, because you knew what type of photography he liked, and that's how he was going to judge and comment on your work. If he was a landscape photographer, there was no point in you putting in a street photograph to get a high mark. He had no basic interest. And I think this is where the Arcanum is offering me and others an opportunity, me to voice about other people's photography. We can be as critical as we like. We hate it, we like it, we love it, whatever. But it helps us. It helps us as we go along, and this is what we need to hear. And I think the actual setup which Trey has created, I think is fantastic. What you get out of it is what you put in, and I think that applies right across the board to any university or college or any course. And you've got to roll with it with regards to what your master, as in terms of the Arcanum, says, and at the same time what your fellow apprentices say. And I think it's a very, very good start. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Yeah, there's been some guys.
That's cool. Out. You know, I think also, you know, when you mentioned your previous instructor too, I think you can even learn from the things that are, I don't want to say bad, but not right for you, you know. And I think it's important to have that point of reference to see what you're getting out of it now. And that is unfortunate. I mean, that's part of the deal too. I think for any discipline, whether it's photography or accounting, you know, you're going to have teachers along the way that make more sense than others. But yeah, what you're saying though, and I really like that. Maybe that's the challenging thing there, is having, you know, rather than having one voice of education, is splitting that up across you know, multiple people or whatever that is. I don't know, but yeah, it's certainly cool, and I love the fact that it's trying something, it's pushing it.
Yeah, I'll give you an example which has happened recently. My final level is, I'm on level 9 now, so I've just presented my final 5 images, which I'll be talking to Valerie very soon about. But before that, I put 24 images up in the previous level for my fellow apprentices to comment about. Good or bad, what do you reckon, guys? And the volumes of comment that I got was just amazing. And there was good comments. This ain't as good as the last one, Paul. Drop it. This one's great. And all the comments were valid comments, which is just great. It was really great. So yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying the Arcanum, and I think it's a great way to learn. Whether it applies to it, obviously applies, I think, better to the arts rather than other sources, but of course the apprentice was the old way that people used to learn the woodwork, used to learn their engineering, used to learn their bricklaying, their building, and all sorts of things like that. So it's nice to see it back on board.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about you when you're going out. When you're going out photography, if you get a chance to go out photography, what gear do you take when you go out, Ted?
Oh my!
Can you remember that far back?
Yeah, no. I mean, it is funny, and you know, let's talk about this. But I'll preface it by saying, you know, we haven't gotten into it, but actually this week, and I'm going to announce it on my channel on my podcast tonight. But I actually made the decision this week. We've done very well with the podcast in the last year, and I've been faced recently. I put a thing on Facebook about this, and it was a tough decision to come to, because I work with a lot of people that I really like. I love being in the art world. I love being in a museum, but I really don't have time to do both anymore, and I had to make a choice. And I've decided to go ahead and take a leap, and I would go ahead and do the podcast full time. So that's pretty exciting. Another thing that filtered into that decision somewhat for me was the fact that I have been so busy between doing a podcast and doing my day job and producing largely video media, and a lot of event photography and documentational kinds of photography at the museum, that I had to get out of it because I need to start shooting again. So that ties into what you're about to mention, because, you know, when you're not actually practicing as a photographer, well, for me it becomes a problem, because, you know, you're teaching photography and then I start to feel like some kind of charlatan or something, that, you know, I'm not even practicing what I preach. So it's really important for me to start doing personal work this year. But in terms of equipment and gear and things that I use, and I think, you know, this will make sense based on what we said before of just my view as photography as this whole. I view cameras, film, flash gear, tripods, all these things that are equipment. They're essentially tools, or I think even a better comparison would be to, like, if you're talking about a chef, they're ingredients. And so I like to do different things, and sometimes what it is that I'm looking to produce, those ingredients require maybe alternative process, or sometimes maybe they require darkroom, or maybe they require a pinhole, or there's a certain look, or there's a feel, and so that's what I'll cater to. And there are certainly times as well, I get written off as being a film Nazi a lot because I talk about film ad nauseum, but I shoot a lot of digital images as well, and there's a place for that. And sometimes I think where you don't get good results, or when you get kind of mailed in results, is when you shoot with one medium that really needs to be in another. I think the most obvious comparison to this is if you want a film-like look to something, and it's a personal project. You have, let's say, you have unlimited resources and time, but you still choose to shoot that digitally, and then try to replicate a look in Photoshop. And that's where I think you might get good results if you're really good at that, but why bother? Why not shoot it if you're trying to get a pinhole look? You need to shoot on a pinhole, or if you want 4x5 look, or how big does the grain need to be in the image, or how does the film need to respond? If I want something that's going to respond well with Tri-X, then it doesn't make sense to shoot it on Tri-X, not on a digital camera to try to get a Tri-X look to it. So all that to say, I shoot both, and sometimes I understand totally that digital, and this is the unfortunate side of it, is very fast, and a lot of times, depending on the size or the timeline on the time on the deadline or the turnaround of the project, shooting digital is really the only thing that does make sense. The use of the images. For instance, I have a very good friend who just recently, but boy, he was the last hold of the Die Hard film wedding guys, and he would take a Hasselblad and shoot weddings on film, and just the amount of work in processing all of that and presenting. I mean, because people are used to having 3,000 images shot at a wedding, and I mean, you really want to do that much with film and that many prints. And of course, he'd send most of it out, and he became very expensive, and he was extremely good, still is, and people would pay for this. He would do these hand-bound albums. But, in fairness, his choice was, I want this look, and I'm going to do this on film, and he held out as long as he could on it. And I think just now the turnaround time and the workload are just too great to do that. So digital has its place for that. Digital has a beautiful look for certain things. And so, I mean, like I said, I don't just really discriminate against anything. I think the things, I know you're looking for an answer as to what equipment I use. I certainly do shoot digital when I need that immediacy. I think that's what defines it for me, or the clarity or the high resolution to it when I can't do 4x5, obviously. The other things I tend to like, or I tend to prefer most of the time, are pretty lo-fi in nature. I mean, my favorite cameras are the ones that with the bad lenses that aren't supposed to take good images. Anything from a Diana or a Holga. I think my favorite camera that I own is a Chinese camera they built in the 80s called the Great Wall DF, and I love my Great Wall. It's a piece of junk, and sometimes the film gets tangled up, and the lens is like, the rumor is they were enlarger lenses that were repurposed as camera lenses. I don't know if that's true or not. But there's this wonderful, weird kind of 3D texture that you get when you're shooting with low depth of field sometimes and you're blurring out a background, and it just totally looks different than, when I have my Canon 5D and it's got this really nice lens that's perfected on the top, and everything's clear. Well, there's no personality in that for me, and, so I like the stuff
that's too perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's too perfect. I mean, but there's...
too perfect.
But I use the perfect lens when it's or the lens that strives for perfection. I use that when it's not calling for artistic quality or a funky look to things. I mean, you can't use a Holga for everything.
You can get your iPhone out, put the Hipstamatic app on, and change the lens and change the film round, and you get the old image like straight from what used to come out of, I don't know, a Holga or a Zorky or a Fed or. See,
what's interesting,
I've learned from you, Ted.
Oh yeah, but what's interesting about that, Paul, is almost, and here I'm going to be a contrarian here and contradict myself, but the funny thing about mobile photography is it's almost separated from what I just said about that whole recipe analogy with ingredients. And I think for me, I think in a lot of ways, I think for most people, the cell phone camera has replaced the Pocket 35mm or even the Pocket digital camera for that matter. Mainly because you have integrated software that can manipulate the image, but even more important than that is that you have communications built into it, so I can share it either by text or by internet instantly. Yeah. And that is the key, and that's what changed everything for it. And I mean, 35mm was an amateur format when it started being put in. I mean, and those Nikons from the 80s were expensive, and so were the Canons, and but there was an immediacy you could get to it. You could take photographs, and I'm talking about 35mm, and actually let's say the 60s moving forward. But you could all of a sudden get a camera into intimate locations and get pictures that would have taken too much time to set up. You would have missed the moment had you been going with large format or medium format. And that's what changed the landscape for everything, and photojournalism changed forever. And I mean, you'd never see Bresson tugging around a large format camera because, I mean, he's got to be a little more stealth, so it served a purpose. And I think what's interesting is watching how mobile photography is changing that yet again. And sure, I mean, my camera on my iPhone is not as nice as some of my other things, and sure, you can manipulate it with the apps. The only problem I have with apps is that, especially with the Instagram filters, remember when those came out, and it all looks like everybody's taking the same photo because they're so vignetted and anyway, but all that to say, I mean, it's just such an interesting space to watch and see, and I use mine all the time. I think, even just as photographers, and I don't know, you're a big street guy too, but you need to constantly be practicing, and having that camera with you and something to just think about composition or where you are in time and place and what is around me and how could I get a slightly better view. This cell phone's great for all that. You can do it on your lunch break, you can constantly find that time to practice shooting images. So there's so many wonderful uses for it. But
yeah, I do remember when one of your podcasts when you mentioned about the usage of the iPhone, that you thought it was basically it reflected what we'd seen, as you've just mentioned, about when Cartier-Bresson started using the Leica, and that there was a load of people that were using it at the same time. It was that sort of move into photography, which I think the plate photographers, the big cameras, the tripod cameras, must have looked at these guys with his 35mm and thought, well, that's not real photography.
Of course they did.
I think there was a period of time when the mobile phone turned up and the camera's on there. Well, that's not real photography, but it is. It's as you know, it's a recording of an image and a moment in time. It's a very important area. Interestingly enough, I was talking to a guy recently, and he was knocking at HDR photography, and I said, I think you'll look at HDR photography in the future as what people used to look at color photography when it first hit the scene.
Sure.
It's a movement in time which is happening.
Yeah, it is. It's I think any movement in time, and I think this goes for any trend in photography. I think it goes for any photographer as well. We don't know what is going to be viewed as important history until it is history. So obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can see, and it is funny, if you study history and you can see trends that come along, and you can make estimates based on that. But there was a day when darkroom manipulation was frowned upon. Even early on, if you take the person who comes to mind for me was Gustave Legray, for instance, French photographer, and he shot. This was really early on, and your latitude, what you could shoot on, was very limited. But Legray he was very famous, being known for these skies, and he would get these skies of high drama and very brilliance, and he was doing that in camera. And what he did is a system, I don't know specifically, so if you do know, and forgive me if I'm getting this slightly wrong, but it was done where he could actually overexpose or underexpose by covering parts of the lens or the frame of the camera. And so anyway, it was essentially the equivalent of if you're using a filter in the darkroom or even over your lens today. Yeah. And he was criticized heavily for, you can't get that. And photography shouldn't be that at this point. At this point, photography wasn't even really art. Photography was simply this way of cheating drawing and making documentational imagery, to say. But Legray was challenging this, and he was doing these beautiful seascapes of ships. And look him up if you're not familiar with him, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because they are beautiful. But he was being criticized for that. Later on, you have people who are criticized for too much darkroom manipulation. And now the big trend, obviously, is Photoshop manipulation. And people criticize when images are too manipulated. And so, I think you can look back in time, certainly, and it's almost kind of funny, because like if you do a lot of darkroom manipulation, like you're a real man, you're doing it right, and you're not using the Photoshop, but it's all, and there'll be something next after that changes it again. Maybe it's mobile, maybe it's something we don't even know that exists
exactly
yet.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
let's. I'm going to turn the tables on you, Ted, because one of your super way of sharing people's photography is go to Pinterest. So I'm going to Pinterest Ted Forbes. So here we go.
Oh boy. Do we have to do this, Paul?
Oh boy, here we go. He says, I've got
This is just going to be old work, and
well, what I've done.
Now, am I going to be able to see this, or?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to hold it on there.
Right.
No.
Good deal.
Is that right? Can you see that screen?
I can see it. Yep.
Okay, let's go.
That's
to
not
this.
Pinterest.
Can you see that?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I can. Okay, you didn't do too bad.
I didn't do too bad. I chose some good photographs.
Too bad.
So what I've done, folks, basically, just let me just explain this to the viewers. What I've done, I just went on to Ted's website, focus.nu, and I picked out some images which I like, and I want Ted for you to talk them through.
Sure.
There may be a few people that don't know how you've done this, so I'd like you to talk us through, describe the image, and the purpose behind the image, because obviously there's a story behind every one here.
Yeah, I think so.
But anyway, first one is the peg. Let's talk about this one. But
yeah, the first one's the peg, and I'll let you move through these individually. But the top, okay, so the peg, the one next to it, the small flower, and then what looks like steam jets right under it. Those are all lumped. They were all done roughly about the same time. Yeah, that top row.
Yeah.
I was experimenting. I was experimenting. I got kind of this thing. This was a couple summers ago, and for some reason for me, maybe I have more time in the summer, but summer becomes redefinition for me sometimes. Also, living in the great state of Texas, it is extremely hot and extremely humid in Dallas, and it's just miserable to go outside. So a lot of times I'll start working at night, and these were all done in the darkroom. These are what are known as photograms, and if you're not familiar with that, what a photogram is, there's no camera, there's no lens, there's nothing. You have a piece of paper that you put down on the table, and I used an enlarger. Actually, yeah, the first three were done with an enlarger just because it's a consistent light source. You're not enlarging anything. You're not using anything but the light inside. But you can also do these with a flashlight, and when we get to the fourth one, I'll explain that. But anyway, so basically what you do is you compose by placing objects right onto the paper, and you hit it with light, and you determine, some trial and error. But as soon as you pull the paper out from underneath, you've destroyed your composition. So if you need to recompose it, it will never be exactly the same way twice. And so I was fascinated with that idea. And photograms, are not new. They go back years and years, but they're so low tech that they're no tech, and it really is difficult. First of all, it's all object based, and you have to find things to put onto the paper. And so obviously you have a clothespin that's in the center of the peg, and I had a whole box of those that I used to hang. I mean, they were all found in the and I think those are, well, I was going to say they were dryer sheets, but they're like that. They're like a cheesecloth, and I was looking for materials that had a little bit of opacity and balance with translucity to them, so light is passing through and you end up picking up the texture on those. And so these were some simple compositions that I was experimenting with doing that. This one's just, it looks kind of like a flag with a clothespin, but, and that's the other thing that's interesting is these, you have, a sense of, you kind of know what some of the objects are, but you don't know what some of the objects are. So the paper is less obvious where the peg is more obvious. These were done also, worth noting, is there was a company, I believe it was Harman, who, I don't know if they're owned by Ilford or not, but anyway, they make a paper that is a positive paper. So with any photographic material, be it a negative that you're using or film that you're using in camera or even with paper, it is always going to come out the negative of what you're doing. So lights become black, black becomes white. And that's how it works. So if I enlarge a negative into a negative becomes positive. So these were all actually a positive paper, which is really interesting to work with. And so it really, this is just a direct scan of the piece of paper. That's all it is. There's another one with clothespins that are lying around. There's another image that was, I don't know if it's on that website or not, and I'll have to go see and put it up, because there's one that has a bunch of syringes. Yeah, see if there's one. This is just a small flower, because again, you're working with small scale, so you have to find things that work.
So this paper that you've used here, Ted, is this paper then, after you've actually exposed it to the light, you've actually put it through a normal darkroom process, or
it goes through
straight using the scanner?
You hit it with light.
Right. Yeah.
Depends on how bright your light is. You need to figure out what's too much or not enough. Do a couple experiments. You got to get a feel for it. I've done with a flashlight. Literally, you shine the light and uncover it real quick, and you try and figure out what real quick is, and you do it as such. But those, you do that, and then it goes straight into developer, stop, bath, and then fixer, and then you watch it dry. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But that's how that's done. The paper it's the same paper I'd make a print on. The clothespin, and then the safety pins, the thumbtacks, and the photogram of just the bud, the little weed there. Those were all done on the positive paper that I was talking about, and actually it's cut down to 4x5 because it's designed to be able to put in camera. And I have shot 4x5s onto the paper directly before. It's kind of interesting. There was another shot I did with some syringes. That was kind of interesting. You didn't mark it. Yeah, it may be on the website. Either way, you can go look it up. But my cat had gotten diabetes, and so it was kind of, there was. Yeah. It's weird how your work will do that. You're just kind of experimenting around with what you have lying around, but then it ends up kind of having a little more serious emotional impact or something later on down the road when you look at it. But that's what the photograms are. Actually, Paul, if you want to go to the one the last one we haven't looked at that looks like spray jets. Yeah. Can you actually see this? Yeah, I can. Can you see this? You can. Okay, because it's not showing actually on the screen there. Which one did you want me to show, Ted? The one, it's the fourth photogram of that series. It's actually not part of the series. It's the one with the jets, yeah? Let me just get on the jets. This one. I'll tell you what it really is. It's a comb. Yeah, that one. Yeah, this one was actually done. This was not on the positive paper. This is just standard negative paper, and you can see the rectangle is anything but perfect. And literally, what I did was I
Yeah.
cut these out freehand with scissors. So I literally
Yeah.
went through and made a bunch of little sized prints that I could use, cut them out.
Yeah.
Larger sheet of paper is probably 8 by 10 or something. That's a comb that's sitting on it, and I was just literally experimenting with different things. And notice how it blurs up. Well, the comb I actually have sitting up off the paper, so when the light hit it, and I used a flashlight for that. This is very ghetto. It tends to blur where you have shadows, so it's really interesting and difficult to play with. But literally, that's just a comb that I set down on top of the paper, and mostly what you're dealing with is a shadow, and you can see how the light starts to dissipate from there. I mean, they're not great. They're just experimental.
It looks like jets of water coming out of the holes in the paper.
And also you get a gradient because the paper's not exactly firmly black on the back either, and that's because it was directional with a flashlight. Yeah. The Nuns.
This is The Nuns, bit of street photography by Ted Forbes.
This shot is...
I love the way they're looking at you. What the hell are you doing?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a funny story behind this. So this is a little courtyard not far from where the last place I worked, the Dallas Museum of Art. And I went to lunch one day, and I came around the corner, or I'd gone the other way, and I saw these three nuns sitting over there, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a photo moment if there ever was one. So I went around the corner. This was shot on an iPhone, an old one, like the 3G or something like that. And there was no way I was going to stand over there. I mean, it was just, I guess because they're nuns, and I tend to be a little shy. So I had the thing rigged up, so it's in my hand, it's low, I'm kind of shooting from the waist, and I went by once, and they were too far away, so I had to do the digital zoom where you bring it in a little bit. And then I walked by again, and I was so sure that they were not seeing what I was doing and that I had pulled a fast one on. I came around the corner and realized that was the shot I had. They were totally watching me the whole time. It was hilarious. And I don't know, must have looked really inconspicuous or something with the camera. Yeah. But yeah, that was just a cell phone shot. It was very fun, and I love that one. That's one I'm actually very proud of. It was kind of an accident that it came out at all. I mean, I was going for it, and it just happened to work. But
oh, that's good. That's great. Nice capture. I just love the way they're looking at you with frowning there, the ones.
If I were a fourth grader, I'd get whipped, right? You know. Banked with the ruler.
There were just some images which I thought I'd turn the tables on you. So,
no, I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you.
Just something for you to turn. But I know there are other images. I know where you've done a set where you were down by the lakes and you took some photographs down there, which was great.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I've
talking about the different styles.
Yeah, that's what I've been really dying to get back to, and you know, work is so important, and personal work is so important, and when I'm not doing that, something isn't right. And so that was another part of my decision to get out of a job that was very time consuming to come do something where I'm doing photography and podcasting and all that. So
that's lovely. Okay, so that's good. So I'll tell you what I'd like to do now, Ted, and as I've said to you before the show, and I'll say this to my viewers now, you're probably the only person that whatever photographer name that I throw at you, you will have a one-word association. So we're at that time of the show where we do the one-word association. I'm not going to muck about tonight. Normally I just leave 4 or 5 to my guests, but I've got 10 for you, Ted, because I know you'll know them all.
All right, try me.
So I'm going to mix them up.
Paul, we have a lag right now in the audio, so bear with us here. I'm not going to go according to the list that I gave you. I'm going to mix them up. Okay. I'm looking for one-word association of the photographer or his work. Okay, so this is the first word that comes to mind, right?
First word that comes to mind.
All right.
I'll give you a little clue. My last week's guest, I said William Klein, and he said I'm not going to say the F word, which was absolutely superb. So anyway, I'm going to throw that one straight to you. William Klein.
William Klein. Classic.
Okay. I love his work. I think it's great. There was a superb exhibition last year in London with his work, along with Eva Moriyama. It was amazing. You visited because you came over to London at the same time, didn't you? When it was on?
Yeah, and I did not see the William Klein show. I don't remember why not.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was busy with other things, but.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay, so the next one, Brassai.
Brilliant. Hang on. I hate these. I don't like brilliant. Nocturnal. That's better.
Oh, lovely word, nocturnal. Yes, very much so, because obviously a lot of his
Keeping
photography is
calm.
specialised in Paris at evening time, wasn't it? It's just got his book for about $5. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Oh,
Picked it
wow.
up. One of those Tash Chen books. Absolutely
Oh yeah,
superb.
yeah, yeah.
David
I love
Bailey.
Versailles' work. The whole thing with Paris at night, and I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
it's such a well, it's such a national treasure for a French photographer, because there really is a sense
yeah,
of time and place. But yeah, he's amazing. Anyway, stop me, Paul, because I'll start
yeah.
talking and we'll be 2 hours into this. So
David Bailey.
rock and roll.
Nice one. Have you ever done a show on David Bailey's work?
No, he's on my list. I love David Bailey, particularly. You're talking about somebody who shot with the Rolleiflex. Those the pictures of
Yeah.
the Beatles and just he changed. I think music photography. I think he changed photojournalism in a lot of ways. A lot of magazine photography. I mean, he was such a instrumental voice and all that. And I think he's under
Mm.
recognized. I think largely by a new generation who just doesn't know who he is. But he's
Yeah.
one of the masters. I mean, no question. In fact,
Yeah.
if you're curious, I think the movie, what was it, Blow Up, is based loosely on David Bailey.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is basically blowing. There was a very, very good BBC documentary on David Bailey when he
Oh wow.
first got involved with Vogue and took the photographs over in New York, and he got out the 35mm camera and started taking the photographs, and he got blasted by the art director of the event. She
Sure.
said, "Go and get your tripod, go and get your Rolleiflex and all that." It was great show.
They hired him to be David Bailey.
And I've got
He
to
wasn't
say,
going to do it.
yeah, I got, the next one I'm going to give you, and I want to reiterate, I thought it was a fantastic description of this lady's work, Vivian Meyer, that you gave, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Great work, but I agree with you. I think that she's not being shown the best way. But anyway,
No.
your opinion of Vivian Meyer.
OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
And you need to let me explain that one, though, because that is such, I've never done anything controversial. And it's funny, people either really agree with me on my Vivian Mayer episode, or I've had
Yep.
people just, like, come unglued in the comments. I've had to delete stuff because they get over the top with profanity, and
Yeah.
you don't know what you're talking about, and not said that nicely. But the problem with Vivian Mayer, and Paul, have you seen the documentary yet, the movie that actually came out?
Yes.
Yeah, the documentary was, and I need to do a review of the documentary, of the film, Finding Vivian Mayer. It's much better than I thought it was going to be. I think that Maloof is in it too much, and it's very much a commercial, but they did a better job of explaining who Vivian Mayer was, and I think that he does have an interesting concept, if this were all it was, where all I have is some photographs, and I'm trying to put together who this woman was in her life based on, I have this and that only, and it leads to one clue, it leads to another clue, there's a phone directory, then it leads to an interview, and it leads to somebody else. That's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's interesting, 2 hours interesting, but then you realize you have this eccentric woman, that's why I said OCD, who collected everything. She collected newspapers. She was a hoarder. She made audio recordings. She made 8mm, and she took photographs. She happened to have a very good eye, and she has some wonderful photographs that are part of that thing. I do not hate Vivian Mayer's work, but she was not, I don't think she wanted to be a photographer. She did not want to be sold like she is, and her work, like I said, it's consistently very good, but then there's some stuff that's not that good, and I think that what we're seeing there is, this is what John Maloof and the other two collectors that collect her work, they're just putting together everything because they don't know what they're looking at, and they think it's all wonderful, and and it's not, and I don't know, and so, but then there's this craze of photographers who, I guess there's this holy grail of discovering the missing Ansel Adams, or the missing so-and-so, the missing link of history. And so this trailer comes out where they're rolling these newscasts, and you have these talking heads literally saying, she's changing the history of photography. I mean, it's like, come on. Give her what she is, and she's fabulous. And let it be that. It's okay. But anyway, I can go on for days. I don't want to make all your
I totally agree with you. No, I totally agree with you, because I think in actual fact, when you made the comments about it, it suddenly pinged an interest in mine. I thought, no, I think you're hitting the right note here with this, because
well, thank you.
it's a case of they found this work and they just want to get it out there, and she probably would not have been too happy about it all getting out there.
Well, and they're making money on it, and
well,
whatever.
yeah, that's the other thing. Let's move on. Gary Winogrand.
Another eccentric OCD, but legit. Let's say legit is my word for Gary Winograd. Because you can make comparisons. Really actually, it's funny that you had those two together because I don't know if that was intentional or not. But
yeah.
Gary and Vivian, there's a lot of similarities you can make. The photos left behind when they died, this obsession with photos. But Gary was more the real deal, and he did have success as a photographer while he was alive. Gary was one of the best, amazing street photographer, maybe one of the best, you know.
It's interesting because one of our levels we've just done in the Arcanum, we had to choose 5 photographers and put 2 images that we really like of our. And Gary Winogrand was mentioned by 2 or 3 from the group, and he's one photographer which I haven't really looked up on. So he's certainly the next one, which I'm just about to say, is another photographer which I really want to study on because you've just done a show on him called Ouija.
Ouija. He's the American Bresson. Sorry, not sorry. That was. We can't edit. This is live and uncut. I meant to say.
No, you can't.
These French guys with bees. They're, you know. Yeah. So Ouija. I'd say creepishly hilarious. These are 2 words, but I think that Ouija had a playfulness to his work and a sense of humor.
I've only looked at a little bit of his work, and I think for me it's crime that comes to word because he is a crime journalistic photographer.
But he has this ability to shoot something that like is a individual with a gunshot wound in their head, which is this gruesome visual. But he does it in a way that is presented with sometimes kind of like this strange whimsical nature. I mean, it was just so brilliant. You know, to put something as that graphic or gory into a newspaper, but have this spin of style to make it so it's where it's not quite as disgusting or inappropriate. I don't know. It's an extremely talented individual.
Well, the book that you mentioned in that is in my wish list.
Get it. Get any book on Ouija. They're all amazing.
You've got such a bad name in my household, Ted. It's unbelievable. My wife, every time I buy a photographic book, you've been talking to Ted again. So that sort of thing comes up. It's all your fault.
I love it.
Okay, let's move on. Zach Arias. I love his work. Zach Arias.
I'm gonna say he's the rebel.
Yes, yeah.
He's the rebel. I'm gonna say that because Zach Arias to me represents the new generation of. There's several people who make up this representation, but he represents part of a new generation of photographers that are coming up that are very, very talented, and they're doing a lot of their work online, and they're doing a lot of sharing with it. And I think that what he is doing as a photographer and what he's doing for the photography business, the photography world, I think it's very credible. He's doing some wonderful things. I love Zach. He's amazing. Never met him, but I hate him because he's awesome. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think he's learned the hard way up, which I think is where everyone appreciates him because of he had his hard times and he's worked through that, and he's now producing some real quality work. And as you said, which is so important these days, he's prepared to share his comments. He's prepared to share his work and help others, which is really great. Andre Cortege.
I said the word whimsical earlier, but he's whimsical. I'm gonna leave it at that. He's awesome. I love Cortege. I almost did. It's funny you mentioned that because the Ouija episode was going to be a Cortege episode, and it got changed at the last minute because of some technical problems, and I didn't have the book. So
I've only looked. He's coming. I tell you, if ever you get a chance, have you been to Brussels before?
Yes, once.
Okay, there's a fantastic photo/art bookshop in the main arcade in Brussels.
You're talking about the
will never come out.
Palace the Grand Palace. I can't remember the.
That's right. Yeah. There's a wonderful.
I'll have to look that up.
And there's please. If I can, I'll find it for you and send you a little message. But I picked up Andre Cortege's book on reading, which I just was amazed at the work there. One of my favourite photographers I'm really getting into now, Martin Parr.
Revolutionary.
Yeah.
I'd already use that for somebody. He is revolutionary, though. He's Martin Parr go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think we've got a little bit of feedback actually, but if I can just go. When I first saw his work, I wasn't that enamoured about it, but I've learnt a lot more as we're going on. it's a classic style which I think he's managed to create. And as you know, he upset a few guys when he joined Magnum and the like. But
Well,
what's
they
your
needed to be
opinion of
upset.
Martin Parr?
The thing about Martin Parr is that he and that, like I said, they need to be upset. He has this ability to cross over from fine art to photojournalism. I mean, he really is brilliant in that sense. That's why I said revolutionary, because it is kind of a revolt of the status quo of, okay, well, this is what Magnum photography is. Or, you know what, Magnum photography, and it's brilliant. I love just about everything that has come under that brand name. However, Magnum photography, why do we need another guy who shoots in that same style? Why can't you have Martin Parr? You should have Martin Parr. That's my argument. I'm out.
No,
Later.
true. I'm out later. That's part of my title of the show. Okay, the final one, Henri Cartier-Bresson.
Oh, emotionally crushing is what Cartier-Bresson is. He was one of the best. He was on a level like no one else. You know, you have somebody who is really defined. I wouldn't to say he defined street photography is selling him short. He defined photojournalism. He defined war photography. He was one of the early people, you know, and this is what Magnum later became. And of course, he was one of the founding members. But you have, you know, people who live in the United States, or you live in the UK, or you live in your country, and you're in your own insulated world, and particularly when you're coming into the 30s and 40s, where you're in a world war, and there is this. You don't have internet in those days. The internet you have is magazines, and you have publications that come out. And this is the way that people understand what happens on a global scale. So maybe this is documentation of you know, something that is from a third world country that you have no concept of, or maybe it's something that defines French culture, or maybe it's something that's particularly English, or maybe it's something that's very American. And to make that world a smaller place, you have to do two things. You have to represent that culture, and you have to tell a story. And Bresson did that so well, and I think that's why he's regarded as one of the most famous. I mean, his compositional style is so rooted in classical composition. It's almost at times adheres to rules, but it never looks like that. And I think that's what's so brilliant, is he had ways of capturing emotion, ways of telling a story, ways of having figures in a composition, whether they're people or otherwise, relate to one another. And you know, I can't go on about him enough. He was the master, you know.
That word has been mentioned so many times before. Master, very simple. Is you know, I think.
But I don't want to call him a master, because that doesn't seem to really describe. I mean, if you're thinking of one word to describe Bresson, I mean, you could say love, you could say joy, you could say, you know, because those associations that I have when I think of Bresson's work, it's a very positive thing, especially when you consider the time where people shot wars. And I don't know, Bresson brings such there's a happiness and a positivity, and yes, it is greatness, and he is the master, but that's really what transcends that, you know. Anyway.
Yeah. Ted, this has been fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed. We've come to the end of the show, unfortunately. I'm quite honest with you.
That's okay. We're having audio problems too.
I could talk a lot more with you. Yeah, it is. We seem to be getting that. I could hear that in the background. I could talk all night with you. Actually, it's just fantastic.
Paul, I'm losing you. I don't know if anybody's still got me on or not.
Can you hear me now?
I could end your show for you, but I don't want to be that guy.
No. Can you hear me now? I think we may have just lost it. That's unfortunate. So what I'm going to do is, if you can still hear me, and I hope everyone can hear me. I think we've got some interference somewhere, but there's always a saying at the end of the show, which I always bring it to the end. Sorry, this is all ended a little bit of confusion here. I don't quite know what's happened. Can you hear me, Ted? No, Ted can't hear me, so we've lost the connection somewhere. So anyway, folks, sorry about the way this show's ended. I'm going to try and get Ted back on later on and have a quick chat with him and thank him very much. But in his absence, thank you for joining us today, Ted. And as I always say at the end of the show to everyone, leave your camera bag at home. All the best to you, everyone. Bye for now.